Hi guys, gsnmode.com, and I'm here with the Prestigio Multiphone 5400 Duo. This one is a handset that costs $196 and it's a dual SIM quad-core handset that was launched this summer. It's affordable because it costs below $200 and its specs are actually pretty good. The design involves a plastic glossy case that's also pretty slippery. The device measures 9.9mm in thickness, so it's pretty thick. It weighs 132 grams. It has a big camera area here, as you can see. It tends to protrude out quite a bit, this camera ring, and the back cover is actually pretty easy to remove. Spoke too soon. Here we go, and here we have the two SIM slots, and here the microSD card slot. You can see the dual LED flash here, the battery, and now we're going to put the plastic cover back on. The design is pretty solid. This feels like a device that can take a drop or two, and we got capacitive buttons at the bottom of the screen, as you can see, below the screen right here. And you must notice, if you look at the device from the side, its edges are a bit raised compared to the facade, probably in order to protect the screen. Okay, we also have sort of a metal frame around the device. Don't be fooled by this because Samsung also uses plastic to imitate metal. My verdict here would be that this is actually metal frame to make the device more solid, but the judge's ruling is still out on that. At the top we got the audio jack and micro USB port. We got the physical buttons on the side, volume buttons here, on off button here, and you saw the capacitive buttons. This screen tends to be a bit of a fingerprint magnet, but the good thing about this design is that the handset is very easy to use with a single hand. Quick reminder, this model is the Prestigio Multiphone 5400 Duo, and the specs here include a 4-inch TFT display with a resolution of 480 over 800 pixels. We also get 4 GB of storage, and a microSD card slot, 512 megabytes of RAM, and on the connectivity side we get GPRS, Edge, HSDPA, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth 4.0. The CPU inside this device is pretty powerful. It's a quad-core Snapdragon MSM 8225Q. It's a quad-core Cortex A5 with a clock speed of 1.2 GHz. On the GPU side we get an Adreno 203, and on the camera side we have an 8 megapixel camera with dual LED flash at the back and a 0.3 megapixel camera right here. Other specs include GPS, we got FM radio, light sensor, proximity sensor in this area right here near the camera, and the battery on this device, well, this one is a lithium-ion unit. It has a capacity of 1700 mAh, and we did some testing. As you can see, we played with the device a bit, and this battery lasted enough for about 3 hours and 40 minutes of continuous YouTube playback with 50% brightness. It could have been a bit better. I was expecting a bit more from this battery, especially since the screen shouldn't use up too much power because the diagonal is small, and the CPU is also not a main powerhouse. So once again, about 3 hours and a half of continuous video playback, which is a bit underwhelming for this device. Okay, before we move further, I must show you this accessory. This one is a flip cover case that comes bundled with the device. It's one of the pros in the list of pros and cons for this device. As you can see, it's quite useful if you want to protect both the back and the front of your device, and it's also actually pretty easy to remove if you're in a hurry and want to change the look of your handset. Let's try to remove it faster. Here we go. Okay, yet again, bundle with the phone, available for free as a bonus with the handset. Okay, now let's talk about the audio. For that I'm going to enter the music player on this device, play some tunes and check out the speakers. Turning the volume all the way up. This is the maximum volume. Speaker right here. Now let's turn to another tune. Okay, now as you see, we brought the headphones here in the image. You can see that they're actually pretty good headphones. The design is nice, they're comfy in the user's ear, they have very good bass and very good volume. However, I must say that there's a slight hissing sound that you're going to hear on this device. If you listen closely to the slow song, especially like Moonlight Sonata, you'll hear a hissing sound coming from the back of the speakers, sometimes even from the headphones, which is a bit of a bummer if you ask me. As I said, good headphones, so at least that's taken care of, but the speaker was a bit of a disappointment. At least the volume is pretty loud, the clarity is good, and the bass is actually decent. In case you don't want to listen to the tunes you have in your device, we got FM radio here. So here's FM radio, as usual with the option to start recording stuff from the radio, things you can hear. Some settings here, and record duration and all that. Overall, the audio experience is good. As I said, good clarity, good volume, good headphones. However, that hissing sound may be a bit of a problem. Okay, now let's remove the headphones from the area and check out the display. We're dealing here with a 4-inch screen TFT LCD, resolution of 480 over 800 pixels. I'm going to use MX Player and play a video for you. Keep in mind there will be a bit of a problem at first because the hardware acceleration cannot handle this clip. However, we'll resort to software acceleration and everything will feel smoother. This is one of our samples, one of our colorful video samples that actually give you a taste of what the screen is like. 4-inch TFT LCD, 480 over 800 pixels. Sadly, the view angles are quite poor. As you can see, you don't see anything if you turn the device from the side or on the vertical, which is a minus. On the brightness side, this screen can reach 266 lux units and it's a RGB stripe type of pixel display. We have some shots to show you what the screen is like. This is the screen with a microscope on it on black, and this is on white. You can actually see the pixel I was talking about, RGB stripe setup. And once again, the screen has not so good contrast, it will behave badly in the sunlight, but at least the colors are pretty vivid, and the maximum brightness could be just a bit higher. However, on paper, 266 lux units sounds pretty good if you ask me. Okay, so moving further from the video and the audio, we got the camera right here. I'm going to use this for picture taking. Okay, so let's actually take a shot of this object. We got an 8 megapixel camera here. As you can see, it's not the fastest one in the world. Level of detail seems decent at first, but then when you zoom in just a little bit, you'll notice a huge amount of noise that plagues this camera. Okay, so as I said, 8 megapixel camera, dual LED flash. The colors of the pics can be just a little bit dim. You can see that we're dealing with noise even in daylight, and the pictures tend to be a bit burned up. The camera takes pretty good close-ups. And now let's see some of the options available on this device. We have flash options, white balance options, exposure options, scene modes, picture size, picture quality, focus mode. That also includes macro. As I said, pretty good macros on this device, some color effects, saturation, contrast, sharpness, a huge amount of options. However, I have a problem with this interface because selecting stuff with arrows is, if you ask me, a bit counterintuitive. Okay, and in the video section, some more options: flash, white balance, time-lapse interval. You can film up to 720p. Some interesting options here. If you decrease the quality of the filming, you'll be able to select the video encoder, H.263, MPEG-4, H.264. But if you want to film in 720p, you'll see that your samples will be 3GP files, which is not exactly my definition of quality. Other settings here, color effects, power modes and all that. This was the camera UI, and as I said, I'm bothered by the interface based so much on those arrows. Now let's check out the samples. We use this camera to take over 80 pictures and videos, and here are some of them. In full daylight, shots look pretty good. As I said, brightness is not a problem. This is a panorama. However, some of the pictures feel washed out for no reason. Some of the pictures in full sunlight tend to feel burnt out. The level of detail is pretty decent. Colors are vivid. and close-ups are good. Since this device doesn't have an HDR mode, I had to use a variety of exposures, played with them, but once again no exposure setting for special HDR mode. Good color reproduction, but some problems with the noise, as I just said. Okay, we also did some videos, by the way, some more colors here. Okay, now let's look for some of those vids. Here's one of them. Also having slight problems with the noise. And another video sample, let's see if we have one. Okay, now some conclusion. Although this device costs below $200, I was expecting a bit more from an 8 megapixel camera with a dual LED flash. I'm bothered by the noise, I'm bothered by the washed out pictures, and the video that in 3GP don't feel like they're any good, especially because they're too compressed, and the quality bothers me. However, we have vivid colors, good close-ups, and a lot of effects to play with, even though we have to face those arrows from the UI that feel pretty old. Now let's talk a bit about the software. We're running here Android 4.1.2, it's Jelly Bean here, and it's time to have a look at the web browser. This is our sister site, by the way. The virtual keyboard is not the comfiest in the world, but you'll get used to it. You'll see me pressing some wrong keys by mistake. Here we go, gsm.com. The browser is reasonable, to be gentle. It's not the fastest in the world, but also not a slug. Let's see our website in landscape as well. Some scrolling around, pinching to zoom. You can do your browsing on this sub $200 handset in a reasonable way. Okay, time for the benchmarks on this quad-core device. Okay, so we decided to compare this model with the Iboda V200, which is a quad-core device as well, and the Iboda V100, that's a dual-core device, but it has exactly the same price as this model. Okay, so in quadrant we score 4,726 points. We beat both Iboda models, the first one by 700 points, the second one by almost double the score. In Antutu, an impressive score for such a cheap device, 10,600 points. We got beaten by the Iboda V200 with 13,000 points, and we beat the Iboda V100 with 7,300 points. Next up, Nanomark 2, 37.3 frames per second. This is the Adreno 203 GPU talking, and we got beaten by the Iboda V200 with 49 frames per second, but we beat the Iboda V100 with 28 frames per second. Then comes Velamo with 1257 points in the HTML5 test. Here we got beaten by both models, with the first one scoring 200 points more and the second one scoring 100 points more. Finally, in the browser test, BrowserMark 2.0, 1,896 points, not exactly a bad score for such a cheap phone. We actually beat both the Iboda models by several hundred points. I must mention that the Iboda V200 model is better spec'd than this handset because it has a QHD screen and 1 GB of RAM, while this device has 512 MB of RAM and 480 or 800 pixel screen. Somewhere between V100 and V200 you'll find this model fitting as far as benchmarks are concerned. Performance is not a problem, you'll never see a trace of lag on this device aside from the initial startup where it tends to stutter just a little bit. The benchmarks may be lower on this device, but as I said, it fits between the Iboda V100 and V200, especially because it has the same price as a dual-core phone, but it behaves better in benchmarks. Okay, now if you want to talk about performance, temperature and stuff like that, we have a shot here to show you. After some toying around the device, some gaming, some video playback for a few minutes, the temperature will reach 34.52 degrees Celsius, which is a current scan. However, the maximum reached was 36.5 degrees Celsius, as you can see here. So maximal level of 36. Since it's below 40, it's acceptable for this device, especially when we're gaming hardcore on a plasticky handset. Once again, as far as the software is concerned, as you can see, the software experience is the stock one. Prestigio hasn't messed with it too much. They decided to only provide us with apps and leave the Android experience untouched. Okay, now as far as the audio quality is concerned, you can see here the dialer and you can access the two SIMs. And I have to say that the call quality is pretty good, but the audio volume of the calls could be just a bit louder. You can do your multitasking by keeping the home button pressed and deleting tabs like this, which you probably know from hundreds of other reviews. We got the standard widgets here, nothing different from other Android devices. And once again, you saw throughout the review that this device is lag-free, which is a tribute paid to its quad-core processor. Now, as far as the list of apps is concerned, the folks of Prestigio offers you an installer, so you can actually start to install some apps that I will recommend you. You can see here some recommendations, including Facebook, Skype, Google Translate, Twitter, and they even remind you to update some of them. Among the apps that you find pre-installed on the device, there is the Prestigio e-reader. It works both as a bookstore and as an e-reader app. You can tap on one of your books, start reading it like this. Options available here, bookmarks, special night mode. You can search stuff. You also have some settings here, colors, wallpapers, margins, display brightness, scrolling, dictionary, and more. Zoom in, zoom out, navigate. So the perfect compact e-reader for your reading needs on a compact device. Okay, as I said, we also have that installer. There's obviously Google Maps on this 4-inch device. You can search for a restaurant nearby or other landmarks. If Google Maps doesn't cut it for you, we also get Navitel. This one is more of a navigation tool than your standard mapping application. We get a trial mode first. You can download maps for certain parts of the world. And you're going to see the map pretty soon. Here we go. With landmarks here, the option to find a certain address, find a route, some settings here, user maps, navigation interface, POI filter, hide buttons. Intuitive interface. This may not be Nokia here, but as I said, it can find your address in a pretty precise way, and the guidance is pretty good. You can turn to 2D or 3D graphics depending on your preference, and this was the navigation solution, Navitel. Other stuff worth mentioning are the productivity apps like Office Suite 7. It enables you to work with Word documents, or maybe you want to work with spreadsheets. So productivity is also covered here. We also get McAfee security to take care of our malware problems. And finally, I also decided to install a game on this device. This is a kind of device that at first sight may not seem like much, but in the end you will see that it can run, for example, Real Racing 3 or this game right here, Fast Outlaw. Since it has a quad-core CPU but not such a good screen, I expect that only some of the games from the Play Store to work on it. This is actually a pretty good game with pretty good tunes. And the graphics are not that bad either, you'll see in a minute. It's basically Temple Run with a car. Obstacles will include trucks and a variety of other objects crashing onto the asphalt. The controls are pretty easy. You only steer the car left and right to avoid incoming vehicles and all sorts of boxes. At some point you'll even be racing against a plane that will drop boxes towards you. The idea is to get a higher speed and try to stay alive and not crash into a variety of trucks. Then you reach an area where boxes are dropping from the ceiling and things start to get really crazy as the speed increases. Okay, so you get the idea, and you saw that this handset is able to run games. The game was called Fast Outlaw, as far as I know. Now, as far as the pros and cons are concerned, the first pro that comes to mind is obviously the low price, which is below $200 for this handset. Also, the good performance. You saw that the benchmarks were actually pretty good for such a device, considering it has a quad-core CPU inside. And other things that we appreciate when it comes to this model is the pair of earbuds that comes bundled with it. So this one also goes in the prongs. Here they are, comfy, great volume and great design. So yet again a good aspect. And also the bundle case is also a welcome addition to the accessory list. The lots of camera options available on this device are also a good thing. The good close-up pictures that we took using this camera are also bonuses for the device. The bunch of apps that we can download on this handset are also good, and the solid build of the phone is yet another thing to appreciate. It looks like it can take a hit or two. On the bad side, we got the noisy pictures that the camera takes sometimes. The battery could be just a little bit better, and the viewing angles of the handset, as you can see, are not top notch. And also the screen doesn't behave exactly top notch in sunlight. Okay, so the final grades, we give this handset an 8 out of 10 for design, an 8 for the hardware. Here it loses points in the camera area just a little bit, and in the screen area only a little bit. For operating system and user interface, yet another 8 out of 10. This is a solid mid-range phone, and the final grade is 8 out of 10. As I said, the camera has a bit of noise, however, that is compensated by the good close-ups and also by the colors of the pictures that you can see here. Keep in mind that this phone is still one that's affordable, so that's why we'll decrease our expectations from the camera, and in the end you'll see that this 8 megapixel shooter is actually quite decent. So overall, this Prestigio handset gets an 8 out of 10 for a solid mid-range phone.